Hello and welcome to Easy Cap Race podcast. This podcast series delves into news, trends, and educational material for entrepreneurs who want to be among the top 1% of successful founders. Today, we will discuss the effects of the so-called economic downturn on startup companies. Stay tuned and let's see how you can outsmart the current market. So, let's pause and think. Are we on the brink of one of the most significant recessions of all time? Well, maybe and maybe not. For one thing, the interbank interest rate or federal funds rate as a tool to control inflation has never been this high in a decade. As a result, the economy might be slowing down to the extent that a US recession is effectively inevitable in the next 12 months. And big tech companies like Meta and Amazon announced thousands of layoffs in the year ahead. Now, what do founders usually do during a recession? In reality, most preserve the status quo and hope for the best. Some bluntly cut expenses across the board, while the most opportunistic ones use the downturn to strengthen their businesses to become even more competitive when growth returns. As the saying goes, tough times create strong men. It's also been said that tough economic times bring out the best in exceptional businesses. Why is that? It's because during recessions, most startups will back out, hence less competition, more growth opportunities, and high chance of establishment for the ones who do not quit the game. Let us now go through some of the most successful companies which started in a recession. Number 1. Microsoft. Microsoft was founded during 1975 oil embargo recession. Number 2. Electronic Arts. Founded in 1992 during the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. It's worth mentioning that EA has also been predicting the World Cup champion correctly 4 times in a row. Its latest prediction was Argentina, of course. Number 3. Airbnb, one of the famous examples of the Great Recession survivors. It raised funds from Sequoia Capital in 2008. Indeed, we remember how mortgage-backed securities devastated the economy in that year. Number 4. WhatsApp, founded by 2 former Yahoo employees in 2009 during the height of the economic crisis. Acquired 4 years later by Facebook, now Meta, for $19 billion in a record-breaking transaction. That's your first time here? Worry not. I'm Eva, the fundraising associate at Easy Cap Race Company. I help business founders find the best investors, help them find the best ways to pitch the investors, to open their checkbooks, and see their dreams realized. If you want to learn more, stay with us until the end of this episode. So, how did these companies overcome the downturn and become the ultra-famous companies that they are now? What lessons can we learn from their strategies? What are the similarities in their approach towards difficult times? There are 4 main lessons that we can learn from them. You can beat recession as a founder by learning and implementing these strategies. Number 1. Be like camels. In times of recession, investor sentiment is beginning to shift away from companies whose strategy is to pursue growth at all costs. Business leaders must consider how much they are willing to burn to drive top-line growth. Businesses should also consider the amount of investment and the investors' expectations. So, what can you do in this regard? Be like camels. Yes, camels, not unicorns. What we have learned from camels is to sustain growth in adverse conditions, but unicorns tend to grow fast at all costs. Successful startups tend to behave like unicorns during booms and camels during busts. Camels go for sustainable growth, but unicorns look for a rapid transition to scale up in the shortest period. But how can startups behave like camels to have balanced growth? Managing costs during the life cycle of a business is a critical factor in extending the cash runway. Spending too much in the early stages to grow fast would increase the burn rate. Another critical factor is proper pricing and charging customers based on the market environment. Some startups try to reduce prices and offer tempting discounts to attract more customers, which can result in a high burn rate and decrease the company's cash runway. Number 2. Pivot, change, pivot. A shift in the economy also affects the behavior and priorities of market participants. An intelligent entrepreneur would analyze competitors' products and customers' needs to find new opportunities. For example, let's look at MailChimp Company in 2009 and its survival and innovative strategy during a financial downturn. MailChimp's initial focus was on providing yearly retainer-only services to large business clients. But new guidelines were introduced after the Great Recession of 2008, and they were forced to rethink the business model entirely. In 2009, MailChimp made the wise decision to launch a freemium business. The results of that change were astounding. In just 1 year, MailChimp's user base increased from 85,000 to 450,000. Number 3. Watch out for costs. Most businesses experience a decline in revenues during a recession, which requires them to cut costs. Overcutting can hinder a company's ability to expand in the future, while waiting too long to reduce costs jeopardizes the company's survival. Here are some tips from experts that you can use to reduce costs during a crisis. Automate the processes. Be more transparent about the company's objectives. Identify the root causes of unnecessary costs. Try to find ways to optimize customer lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. Number 4. Recession is part of the game. It takes time and effort to build a business. In times of economic crisis, staying alive is frequently the primary goal. As we have learned from history, downturns are only temporary and typically end with a more extended period of growth than the recession itself. And despite the economic challenges, there are always chances for those who are prepared to seize them and have the necessary focus, ability, and execution power. What sets successful entrepreneurs apart from the general population is their capacity for taking and enduring risks. Finally, remember that recessions and economic crises are a natural part of the business cycle, and entrepreneurs should be prepared for them. Investors are more likely to invest in a company if it can endure a downturn. As we mentioned in this podcast, many successful and famous companies today are coming from previous recessions. 2023 will be an excellent year for founders, startup CEOs, and innovators to focus more on building their businesses and startups so that they can exit with much higher valuations when the recession ends and a new bull market starts. Did you fulfill your 2022 business goals? So let's get your business moving. The best way to get started is to work with a fundraising agency that can help you build a compelling story for investors, get them to write a check for you, and close the right deal. You can book a consultation call with us to scale your business in 2023. Just visit www.easycapraise.com. And bye for now.